So we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of overwhelm. First, I want to show you, I got the new books. So they're consistent now, which is really exciting. Interior Designer has about 50 more pages. So now Interior Designer is 160 pages. And I took some time to take in all of your requests of like just how to integrate interior design of the body deeper into the body. So I hope you enjoy this. And then I'm really excited about It's Personal, which just came out last week. So we finally got the prints and it looks really, really beautiful. This is also it's also about 225 pages. And it's the newsletters from the last 6 months diving into deeper detail. So that is something that I really enjoyed working on. So it's personal, it's your emotions, your relationships, and your choices. And I start with something really powerful. And it's from the concept of Alice in Wonderland. And it says that Alice comes to a fork in the road and she asks the cat, which road should I take? And the Cheshire Cat says, where do you want to go? And the cat responds, I don't know. Sorry, Alice responds, I don't know. So the cat says to her, then it doesn't really matter. So, and I open the book with that concept because for so many of us, if we're unsure what we want, even from our own emotions, if we're unsure and we're not able to take accountability for what we want to feel, then there is this sense of sometimes we'll feel like we don't matter, right? And we'll feel like our life is lacking purpose. And it's just lacking purpose from the sense that we haven't taken the time to formulate what it is exactly that we want. And then we become of service to other people rather than to our own lives. And that kind of, takes us out of that space where we are able to build something um, that we want for ourselves. So when we think about proactive living in general, and we talk about preventing overwhelm, right? Um, there, there's this thing in life that we wait for an urge. For example, like I say, don't wait till you feel hungry to eat something. Because if you're already waiting for that urge, by the time you get to that place where you have that urge, you're already feeling a sense of agitation, and your body needed to kind of send you this kind of signal, this very, very strong signal. Now, the thing is that for a lot of us, when it comes to boundaries, creating boundaries with others, and when it comes to our emotional, physical, or mental energy, a lot of times we're doing a similar thing where we're waiting for urges. So we often wait until things get unbearable before we act on it. So a simple example would be like waiting for um the laundry to be like for you to have no more laundry and the laundry basket to be so full or the sink to be full of dishes to the point that there that you have to do it, right? So it's like, oh, I need clothes, so now I have to wash. And what happens is we do this a lot in finances and in relationships. And the thing is it's important to ask yourself, where in your life do you let things pile up? Now, the thing is, it's not that we can't handle things when they pile up. It's that two things are happening. Number one, we only act if something is overwhelming versus approaching a situation from a place where like you can take smaller steps. Um, if there's two dishes in the sink, you have usually a lot more energy to um get it done, as in it doesn't require as much from you as an entire sink of dishes. And so then we're dealing with things on micro doses, right? So with finances or relationships as well, where as in if we're in a place where we kind of just let certain behaviors just go under the rug. So for example, if you're in a space or a relationship, and this could be in a personal relationship or a relationship at work or even with yourself, that you're like, you just keep letting things go. Um, for example, when it comes to something like dieting, then dieting becomes this overwhelming thing where you have to then restrict yourself. And that behavior ends up becoming so aggressive. And for women, it's not such a healthy thing to be in that place of deficit, right? Of restriction, because when we're trying to focus on flow, um, and flow is really deeply connected to like our receptors, the ability to receive, um, waiting for those extremes are just not going to prove productive. So in a personal relationship or any of those relationships, if you find there's a place where you're like, okay, you know, you already find that you have that first sign of like, okay, I'm not so comfortable with this. You don't have to, we have to set boundaries, right? So the thing is boundaries through actions. So a lot of times when we think of boundaries, boundaries aren't just words. Boundaries are about what we do. Instead of waiting for frustration, take small steps to protect yourself, your time, your energy, and your well-being. So don't like a lot of people are like, I told that other person, but when you're telling that other person and you're not actually, and you keep participating in the cycle, then you're actually perpetuating the cycle, and the cycle keeps moving forward. So when we set a boundary, we have to make sure we're not punishing the other person either, because then it just becomes about the other person rather than taking accountability for ourselves. So we don't want to freeze the other person out either. And this could be like, you know, for example, if there's a work situation, right? So if there's a work situation where um you're not enjoying yourself as much in that space, and you're like, I'm just gonna ignore that person, or I don't care what they say anymore. What ends up happening is again, you're again in a position where you're cutting off the flow. Um, and you never want to be in that deficit, because that is what hurts you more than anything else. So when we say boundary through action, we first have to go into that place and ask ourselves a question. Like, you can ask, we talked about this a little earlier, from Alan, I think Bonnell. He says, ask yourself, like, life is dot dot dot, right? Answer these questions. Women are, men are, and life is. And if you answer that question for yourself, I am, once you answer those questions, what you're doing is you're creating the ability to understand your perception of the experience. um I had an experience lately where um just some kind of business negotiation, and that cycle of, oh, like, men, not that they're better in business, but that I have to deal with more men than women in business, was just a little frustrating. And I could see that kind of repetitive piece in my brain. And I had to kind of step away and be like, okay, let me let me step away from this and look at the entire picture. And the reality is as a woman, again, speaking for myself, having responsibility of a home and children and like these internal relationships, I would love to spend more time at work, but at the end of the day, I have to ask myself what I want, right? And if I if I prioritize my internal life, right, my interior design more than I value like building a career, right? Um, that's kind of where I have to understand where I toe that line, right? So how many hours do I spend at work versus how many hours do I spend in the house? And when I start delegating, right? Um, it's taking that time to know that for me to be able to do what I do well, I can't take on too much in a specific area because like money doesn't solve all problems. If I need to be present, then I need to value that presence. So I found myself kind of justifying that genuine justification with, oh, like why do men always have to be part of this thing? And I saw that it was like an unhealthy kind of loop that went on there. And it was helpful to understand where that was coming from. So when we can answer those questions, so if you're in a relationship of sorts, and this could be even a relationship with yourself or the person you're in it with, or your children, or your boss, or money, or energy, just ask yourself, this person to me, right? This person is, and just answer that question. My time is, answer that question for yourself. My energy is, right? My health is. And there's no right answer. But what you're trying to get out of that is your perception of it, which is going to motivate or help you understand where it is that you're trying to go or what might be working against you in that situation. So as we move through that, then you could also then set the boundaries clearly because then you know the answer. And boundaries can't be set around. So boundaries in interior design are lines. You can't put up a boundary where you don't know where that boundary is. So by answering those questions, you get the ability to really know where to enforce that boundary through action rather than words. So the next one is breaking the procrastination cycle. So procrastination is waiting for the discomfort to justify the action. Um, for a lot of us, there's those small daily choices that we could do to prevent further stresses, and prevent some of that discomfort. So taking the time to ask yourself, why are you waiting for this discomfort? What is my relationship with pain or suffering? Um, like you don't have to excuse or explain your behavior, not to yourself or not to anyone else. And if as a child you had to explain yourself or justify, sometimes that kind of comes up. So, what small steps can you take today to prevent feeling that overwhelm later? And what stops you from doing what you need to do now, not to have a stressful outcome? So, these are like little things that you could kind of implement into your daily life to help integrate like proactive uh like a proactive process where you end up eliminating some of the overwhelm in your life. And instead of kind of going into the whole process of why am I overwhelmed, take the small steps to um, approach it and see what happens once you're able to implement some of these steps. Um, it always starts also with regulation. So noticing if some of the sensations are just coming up because of natural habits, or maybe the way people in your life kind of showed up, if your mother was somebody that always kind of made a big deal out of things. Sometimes we have this perception that things have to be blown up at a proportion to be for us to be appreciated or for things to be justified or excused. Um, so just notice where that comes from. And again, you can bring that question in of like as you kind of move through that discovery of maybe why do I wait for things to be overwhelming? Notice number one, the urgency. Are you putting urgency on things that don't matter and pushing things that matter further down the line? Right. So a lot of times what we it's the same concept of saying money will solve our problems. When if you have certain challenges, if you just take care of those challenges, you don't need the money um to do the like the damage control later. It's just if you want to be in a specific kind of relationship, show up in that relationship. Um, you're not going to get that person to like you more because you have more money or status or importance. There's an action step that has to be taken. So just pay attention to that. And then take a few minutes a day to regulate yourself. When we take those action steps of regulating our body, regulating our emotions in the morning, we can clear out some of like that pent up energy. It's like getting up in the morning and having a stuffy house. Sometimes all that needs to happen is that the place needs to be clear or you need a good meal. And once you're in that place, you can come from a better place of perspective. So just notice if it's a passing emotion, if it's just a first draft, or it's something that's genuine. And then if it is, um, just go into like, am I asserting boundaries, or what is my definition of that experience personally, with that kind of line of, whatever it is, right? Even money is. Um, One last thing I'll leave you with is another thing to do is a lot of times an emotion, like emotions pass and or settle, right? So I always say like emotions are the first draft, and allowing that first draft to kind of settle in is really important because it can be redefined and we can renegotiate it with it, from a realistic aspect of once the cortisol kind of comes down and we open up that perception, we see more details. And when we see more details, it helps give perspective. So sometimes taking action, right? It's saying like when you're in a place and you're like, I'm overwhelmed, and then you kind of take action on that overwhelm rather than so like you'll talk to somebody or you'll do something specific. But sometimes if you just took some time to peel back that energy, relax into yourself, and really soften into that space, a lot of times we can self regulate rather than stimulate whatever that emotion is. So, those are little things to take into consideration as you move through your day. This will be available in the newsletter, so feel free to sign up, like, and follow if you can. This really helps me do the work that I do here. And yeah, I'll see you in the next week.